Ronnie says bad people took my daddy, bad people with guns. She draws the situation at times. She speaks about it. She remembers so much. Ronnie asks for a father every day. And every morning she asks my sister Lishai, did you manage to bring Omri home, Daddy Omri home? Every morning she asks her that because Lishai is doing so much during the day that she sees it. She sees how hard her mother works. And we try to explain them, no, but we keep trying. We keep trying and we will succeed eventually. And Alma thinks her father is a poster right now. She says Daddy Omri to a poster. And a few weeks ago, she asked my sister whether she can see him. And that broke her heart because she didn't know what to tell her.
On October 7th, 2023, a day that marked one of the most horrific attacks on Israel, Hamas terrorists kidnapped 46-year-old Omri Miran from his home in Kibbutz Nahal Oz, located in southern Israel. Omri was taken across the border into Gaza in his own car. Miraculously, his wife, Lishai, was left behind with their two young daughters, Roni, just 2 years old, and Alma, only 6 months old. For over 500 days now, Omri has been held captive in Gaza, far from his family, who are desperately waiting for his safe return. And joining me today from New York is Omri's brother-in-law, Moshe Lavi, who has been a voice for the family, lobbying for his brother-in-law's release. Moshe, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Moshe, to begin, Omri is not part of the first phase of the hostage ceasefire deal. He's hopefully slated to be released in the second phase. How are you and your family coping knowing that Omri's return is still pending?
Yeah, it's very difficult. It has been difficult for us to process the fact that there has been several releases and we don't see Omri coming home. We see families being reunited or at least closing their chapter with their loved ones who were murdered in captivity being buried. And we can't have that closure. We can't have Omri again with the girls and with Lishai. But we keep advocating as a result, and we do it for all the hostages, not only for Omri. It's imperative that everyone who is still held captive, whether alive like Omri or dead, will return to Israel as soon as possible. Their time is running out, and we have to emphasize that with everyone we meet along the way.
Speaking of the people that you've met, what communication, if any, have you received from the Israeli government and American representatives regarding Omri's situation and potential release?
So we never get information specifically about Omri's status, whether he's been slated to be released or not. We know that the first phase ended last week. We know that there's no agreement for a second phase or extension of phase one. And that's the sort of information we receive from our government and from the Americans. And we try and emphasize to them, as I said, that we can't let this continue. We saw how some of the hostages returned from captivity. They were starved, chained, deprived of water, sunlight. How long can they last there? How long will they last if the fighting resumes? And we try and bring the human element as well, share their story, who Omri is, who the other hostages are, how their families are like, so that they have an emotional attachment to them when they conduct their policies. I hope it works. I hope it pushes those who need to be pushed to understand that they need to act fast. But we don't have the end result we want. In our case, in the case of so many other families, 59 families who are still waiting, just seeing their loved ones home.
I think it's important what you just said, the fact that this is a humanitarian issue. It's not a political issue. These are people's lives that are, as we speak, at risk. Your family actually received a sign of life from Omri through a recently released Israeli hostage. We know that Omri was in the tunnels and apartments until July. He's reportedly physically fine, but it's been 7 months since the month of July. How does this update affect your hopes, your fears for him at the same time?
Yeah, we received a proof of life recently. Before that, the previous one was in late April when Hamas released a psychological warfare video featuring Omri. And this latest one at least gives us a bit more color into his experience. We know that he's coping, that he's strong and resilient mentally, that he's doing all he can to sustain himself as much as possible in captivity physically. We also learned that he gave strength to others. He's a shiatsu therapist in training. So he was able to provide some of his teaching to other captives held with him. And that gives us so much hope that, and also we knew he could do that because he's such a strong person mentally that he could give from himself, from his heart, even in the worst conditions possible. Um, we don't know more than that. We do know he was held independently at some time of his captivity until July, so without other hostages, and some other times he was with other hostages. I really hope he is with others at the moment, that he doesn't need to be coping with it alone. But we also heard that conditions change over time, that at times the captives were even more brutal than they usually are. The recent interview by released hostage Eli Sharabi gave a bit more information about how they would change the conditions all the time, depending on the developments on the ground. And it concerns us that the current escalation or potential for an escalation will again bring about a worsening condition for Omri and all the hostages.
Omri's wife, Lishai, and their two young daughters have been living without him for over 500 days. That's over a year and a half. Can you share how they're managing day to day and how his absence is impacting their lives?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that my sister Lishai is a true lioness, truly an inspiration to me, to the entire family, and I think to so many people in our nation. She advocates relentlessly and in her unique voice makes sure that Omri is present everywhere she goes, whether in Israel or abroad. She is in the rooms where it matters to ensure policymakers understand the gravity of the situation. And while being an advocate and a wife of a hostage, she's also an incredible mother, ensuring that Ronnie and Alma receive the care they need, that they manage to live day by day without their father. She needs to mediate the information to them, obviously. Ronnie is 3 years old, so she remembers more, and she knows Omri in a way that Alma, who is going to turn 2 at the end of this month, doesn't. And Ronnie asks for a father every day. And every morning she asks my sister Lishai, did you manage to bring Omri home, Daddy Omri home? Every morning she asks her that because Lishai is doing so much during the day that she sees it. She sees how hard her mother works. And we try to explain them, no, but we keep trying. We keep trying and we will succeed eventually. And Alma thinks her father is a poster right now. She says Daddy Omri to a poster. And a few weeks ago, she asked my sister whether she can see him. And that broke her heart because she didn't know what to tell her.
That's awful. I just want to go back on the details here. Lishai and Miran, Lishai Miran, sorry, your sister, was left behind with her two young daughters on that horrific day on October 7th. Roni, as you mentioned, was just 2 years old at the time, and Alma was only 6 months at the time that their father was taken captive. How do you explain to children that young the concept of their father is a hostage?
I think it's too difficult to explain to toddlers the concept. Ronnie knows that he was taken. She says, bad people took my daddy. Bad people with guns. She draws the situation at times. She speaks about it. She remembers so much. Alma, on the other hand, we try and not give her too many details about the situation. She's too young to understand it, and also she doesn't really remember it in the way Ronnie remembers it. And what we try and explain to them is that their father is currently away, that we are doing everything we can to ensure he's going to be back, and that they have to stay strong and keep the faith until he's home. That's how we try and explain it. But there are moments at time where they need a father in their household. There are moments at time that my parents, who are their grandparents, are not enough for them because they need a father with them. And that Lishai, my sister, is not enough. They need a father. And those are the difficult moments when they try and understand why other children have two parents and they don't.
We've witnessed the hostage handover to the Red Cross during the first phase of this deal. Hamas staging sick propaganda, having the hostages come on stage and wave for the crowds. But I want to hear your thoughts on the Red Cross and its lack of effort to even establish any sort of contact in order to reach the hostages throughout this war and to make sure that they're being treated humanely and have access to medicine and to care. Many of them are wounded. Have you had any sort of interaction with this so-called humanitarian organization that is supposed to protect civilians like Omri in a conflict zone?
Yes. My take is the following. I think unlike the United Nations agencies, which have some of them been complicit or silent completely about Hamas crimes, organizations such as the WHO that have yet to acknowledge Hamas is using hospitals for military purposes or for holding hostages, not to take care of them. UNRWA, of course, whose employees were abducting hostages and whose facilities were used to hold them. I think the ICRC have done more than people realize. They are in constant conversation with us, the families. They also provide us information at times. I think they should have been much more vocal publicly. I think some of their employees have not done their duty, but as a whole, as an organization, I think they've been trying to get the access they need to get to visit the hostages. We received proof of the actions they've taken. And while I'm not happy with the fact that they were not given access, I'm not happy with the fact that they are not publicly out there enough pressuring Hamas, their accomplices, countries like Iran, Turkey, Qatar. I do think they should be given a bit more credit for what they've been trying to do, and for the facilitation of transferring the hostages from the hands of the morally depraved and genocidal organization Hamas to our hands, to the IDF and in the land of Israel. I think without them, I don't see any other body would have been able to accomplish that. Sadly, I wish that wasn't the case. But they will need to learn some lessons from their failures of condemning her early enough and of showing more empathy. There were some meetings where their employees were not showing enough empathy. They apologized for that later on, but
there were even meetings where they reportedly were meeting with hostage families and telling them to think about the other side.
Yeah, we were present in those meetings. Look, I feel for non-combatant Palestinians myself, but the blame is on Hamas. it wasn't for Hamas, their accomplices, and civilians who aided Hamas and are still aiding Hamas, those non-combatants would not have suffered the consequences of their regime and of this terrible war. But it's not the role of the ICRC or any other UN agency to tell victims of a war to think of the other side. We naturally think of the other side, but it's not the role to tell them, think of the other side in a meeting that is about the hostages.
Many returned hostages have reported being able to see bits of the news and have said that it gave them hope seeing their families fight for their return. If Omri could hear you right now, what message would you say to him?
What I will tell Omri is that his wife, Lichai, is fighting every day to bring him home, that his daughters, Ronnie and Alma, are praying and hoping to see him, that his father, Danny, has not shaved his beard since he was taken, and he just can't wait to hug him, that everyone, his siblings, us, are just waiting to embrace him again and rebuild together the life he deserved to have with my sister and with my nieces.
Finally, what can people around the world do to support your family and others, the hostage families who are going through the unimaginable?
I think everyone can play a role in advocacy. They can pray, and they can donate money to hostage families or the Hostage Families Forum, which is an NGO we set up in order to advocate for the hostages and their release. They can rally on the streets. I'm heading to a rally soon here in New York. Every week we rally here. They can attend meetings. They can organize meetings. They can speak on social media about the hostages to their colleagues, to their communities. They can write to their elected officials to do everything they can to bring them home and demand Hamas to let them go. Everyone can do a small bit, and I think together we can bring them home as soon as we can, alive, those who are alive to be reunited and rehabilitated, and those who were murdered to be buried in the land of Israel.
Moshe Lavi, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. And we sincerely hope that Omri and all the hostages will be released very soon and reunited with their families.
Thank you so much.